The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the hosts. This podcast should not be considered a professional news service. The content is for entertainment and informational purposes only. Accuracy and completeness are not guaranteed. We are regular folks having a regular conversation. We hope that you'll join us.
In theory,
though, the people who should be running should be qualified to do that job. It doesn't mean, and I might get some pushback on this, I don't believe that only teachers are qualified to be on the Board of Education, because teaching is one experience.
Absolutely.
In public education.
Administration is a totally different one, and understanding.
But being a student in that environment, the representation should be how the public education system impacts the community, having representatives that are part of the community to then be in place to then be a voice for the community, and then also regulate the overall structure of the school system. They're not supposed to be getting involved in the day-to-day tasks.
Right.
Welcome to Appalachian Living. We're back.
We're back.
I'm back.
And it's still
And
almost
so is
heaven,
Sarah.
nearly hell.
Almost heaven, nearly hell.
We have our first returning guest today. Yeah. We have Sarah Brown, fresh off of her campaign for the Putnam County Board of Education.
Cheers.
Here to enlighten us.
Where's the
and
camera?
Share her experiences. We have some of her campaign.
Her little swag.
Shout out to Tom and Lindsay for
the design. Is spot on.
Me and Tom made this. Thank you very much.
Looks like a chalkboard with some chalk writing on it.
It was a nice learning experience on how to work with, Adobe Illustrator and stuff like that. So, and be a graphic designer that I am not. But
and
it was
a great
fun.
example of mutual aid within your community, tapping resources of folks who have those skills to help you build a campaign presence.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So
when I took the opportunity to try to see where I could do that, I did that with a friend of mine who has a little side business where she makes t-shirts and stuff too. And so it's hard to do that, especially locally, to kind of have basically local people, local businesses to be able to put money into, because when you are working on a campaign and you are dependent upon donations, and then you have to compare price, I was wanting to make sure I could do as much locally as absolutely possible.
And when it came to donations, because honestly, I gotta say, I've never donated to a campaign, a political campaign. I've never donated. I don't have that kind of spending money. I just don't do it. I guess there are people that are. So in terms of donations, what did you see? Who donated? What kinds of people donated? Was it the locals? Did you have people that weren't even in your district?
Yes. That was so just for everybody, because we're jumping right into this now. I ran for Board of Education in my county, and running for office, I said, I'm running because people in my community have asked me to, so then I will be basically dependent on that awareness, and if I get funding, that's what I will have to use. I didn't order signs until I think close to April, because
I think it was probably a month. You had probably about a month left.
Mm-hmm. And I just, because I wasn't going to tap into anything, I didn't have the funds myself. That's what I think makes it so difficult for everyday people to run for office. They do not have the funding, the private funding, to be able to fund their campaign, and so then they're dependent upon donations. And the people who donated to my campaign, I had so many people who said to me they'd never donated to a campaign before. I had people out of state who I am just close with that I posted on Facebook, social media, if you are able to donate for my campaign and are willing, please do. And I have a friend of mine, Jeff, that lives in Ohio, and he does, he does a lot of stuff with videography and things like that, and he's very talented. And he joked that he would bring his drone and have a little tiny flag flying around the county to advertise more. Anyway, he posted on his Facebook, and I'm one of those people that my family are people who are chosen. They're not blood related family. And Jeff and I always talk, he's my older brother, and so he shared, and he's like, my sister's running for Board of Education, and him sharing that between him, and then I think he had 2 or 3 buddies that donated. I don't know these people, and it was like $175 just between them, or something like that. And I was just blown away, right? And I had people from all political perspectives, so that was something that was really interesting. I think that running for office, it's supposed to be nonpartisan, but everybody...
The school board is nonpartisan.
It is supposed to be.
It's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be
nonpartisan.
And so everyone that was running, though, was a Republican, and I'm an independent. I've been an independent. I wasn't going to change parties because I felt that was not reflective of the race, but also my politics. People over party, and that's how I operate. I don't want an entity trying to, influence how I listen to my community and make decisions based on that. And I had conservative donors. I probably had more conservative donors than I had what you would classify, I guess, like liberal, progressive, or whatnot. I had people who were just desperate for things to change. And I've been intermittently talking about getting involved in politics for years, and I always joked with people I'd probably start with school board. And I decided to run after kind of working in some local politics, and I think it was on Thanksgiving. I actually drove over here to Lindsay's house, and I was like, I'm going to run for office. And they were just like, oh. And then her and Tom were just like coming up with like, okay, well, which office would you run for, and whatnot. And I'd had some, people in my corner who were just great at giving advice. And a long time ago, they said, you need to start with a local race before you jump into anything else. And part of that is, it can be a more inexpensive avenue to run for office. Although if I heard correctly, it wasn't long ago that the second most expensive race in West Virginia, I was told this, was running for Board of Education, I think, in Kanawha County.
Oh, wow. Now,
whether that's true or whether that's still true, I don't know. But I thought that was interesting. It was second only to the governor's race at that time.
And that's based on what the candidates spent on various advertisements.
Yes. And so I came over here and, I was like, I'm going to run for office. And then I met with West Virginia Can't Wait. And I had met with them previously as well, and that was their recommendation. And then talked to them in December and decided I was going to run, and filled out the paperwork in January. But man, it is such a quick turnaround if it's a primary race. So Board of Education's in primary. It's decided in the primary. And so you've got basically the end of January until the beginning of May. And that, I think that was the only way I was going to be able to approach this, because I think that not ever doing anything like this before, and not really having an awareness on how to make it more of a marathon than a sprint. I think that was a great, avenue to figure out, is this something I even want to do? Mm-hmm. And it was an incredible experience, but having that quick turnaround. And then I did a lot of social media work, which was really interesting in comparison to what people normally do with like canvassing. Although I do canvassing, did canvassing already too, and was planning on doing that, but I did canvassing in a different way instead of going door to door where you don't necessarily know if people are going to be home. And then if you're in West Virginia,
canvassing's tricky.
Don't come to my house unannounced. Yeah. Like that. Yeah, that's one of those things. I think that's like a personal thing. Like, don't show it to my house unannounced. Like, what are you doing here? State your purpose.
To that point, I think your social media was really effective. Your campaign TikToks framed a question at the beginning of your video, and it was written out, and you gave the viewers enough time to read the question, and then you would start to speak on it. And so you were really the only candidate I saw use TikTok in that way, where it wasn't just a narrative. Mm-hmm. You actually created a new dialogue and a new way of talking about things that clearly people are interested in. I mean, I was somewhat blown away by the questions folks were posing to you, because they were really thoughtful and in depth, and they dug into policy and they dug into administration, and I'm sure that was fun for you, because you wanted to use this campaign for a Board of Education seat to educate people.
Absolutely.
And so that I'm sure that was a lot of fun for you.
It was, and then for anybody who doesn't know, I was Mrs. West Virginia back in 2012, and so
I am not surprised at all.
Preparing for stuff like that,
Not at all.
preparing for pageants and being in pageants, you have to be ready to answer things on the spot. Well, I would go to as many candidate forums as I could, but oftentimes that's a random variety of whoever is running. It doesn't necessarily mean it's everyone in the Board of Education that's running, right?
And honestly,
Turn
myself all the way up.
There she is.
Sorry, it was either too loud or too low. Okay, carry on. I forgot what I was going to say now.
So, like, it doesn't necessarily mean you have an actual forum, right? So if you could have a debate of, pitching questions. And so there was a local Facebook group that someone had posed, like, hey, let's have this thread where the Board of Education candidates could come here and then answer these. And there was some feedback from other people running, but I went through and tried to answer. I screenshotted the questions. I rewrote them in the same format as same format as my logo, and then would use that as, to kind of keep the same consistency. And what I was doing was trying to get people to understand how I was going to approach policy, because even though this is a nonpartisan race, and it should be, there shouldn't be anything partisan about the Board of Education or being a representative for the Board of Education in your community, because to me, like I said earlier, that intervenes on your ability to listen to your community. So if there's party politics layered over that, then you're going to be less likely to engage with your community, and that's what you're really represented for in the first place.
And your community is one of the most vulnerable communities in the state, just by definition. There are children in public education are little treasures that we really need to protect and take care of. So yeah, it's a different type of representation.
Yes.
That I think deserves a nonpartisan approach.
Yes.
But, however,
the
thing that we can't ignore is the fact that people have been trying to put partisan politics within the school system. And we all know it. And so it's not something that we can avoid. Even though it's supposed to be nonpartisan, people still want to put their partisan politics in something that's as simple as teaching kids how to just learning about the world and how to take care of themselves and how to, be functional adults. But it's a little frustrating for me, and so I'm not going to get on any rant or anything. But I think the social media part of it, and me and Elise were kind of talking about this, like it evolves every time the election comes around. And over the past several elections, I had done the work, like my actual job. The politicians came to us. We would build the website. We would make their social media accounts and be like, okay, here's your access and you can do what you want with it. We're just the producers. We don't do the political
content creation and
right,
stuff like
or
that,
the help you with your campaign or whatever. We're not your campaign manager. Well, we build your website or whatever. But when back in the day, 10 years ago and less, we had social media. We were making social media accounts. We were like, hey, you should probably use this. And, myself, just being the observational person within society that I am, is like, hey, kids within this age are on this app, and kids on this, and people on this age are on this app, and people of this age do this. So you should probably tailor certain different things to certain people because that's what they care about. But they were just like, what?
Resistant.
Huh? I don't know how to do it. And so this time seemed different because we got a whole new group of people that were very social media savvy. And they became more popular, but somehow still didn't win the vote.
Well, correct, because they can be popular, but that doesn't mean name
people
recognition.
like them, or they're like, I don't think that, just because I know who you are doesn't mean that I feel like you would do the best job at the job that you're trying to get.
If they voted.
That's
I think that's a really
and then
important.
Also, we have to say, what's the percentage of people that came in to vote? I think statewide was around 20%.
22,
Some counties were around 12. percent?
So my little precinct in Richmond District in Raleigh County, we have 98 registered voters that vote at my precinct. And it's a tiny little house in a little neighborhood at the bottom of the mountain. And we had the highest average, I think over 25% of our folks had come to vote when I went to vote, which doesn't seem like much, but it felt good that at least in a primary election in our little precinct we had, a showing higher than the state average. And I think that's important. But getting people out to vote is really the challenge the candidates face. I mean, whoever's on the ticket right now, I think in some districts is going to be an anybody but that person kind of race, right? Mm-hmm. And did you address any of that in your campaign about actually getting to the polls or early voting or making sure people understood what that process looked like?
I shared that quite a bit to try to get people incentivized. And there were other candidates that I knew in other counties that I'm in community with that, had access to helping people get rides if they needed that and things like that. But I think something that we really have to consider is that in a state where you had Democrat majority for 84 some years, and then we've had Republican majority for however long, stuff still sucks. So how is it incentivized? There's no incentive to go vote.
People don't feel like their vote really counts anymore.
It's because there has been a disenfranchisement intentionally to get people to not feel as though if they unify their vote with other people as a community to come together, that it will make change. And of course, I could say that goes back to Blair Mountain with the intention of intentionally, trying to sever that connection. I spent my campaign, I tried, and I'm not saying I was good at it, but I spent my campaign trying to build community, trying to make connections. And I think in my race, there were 3 districts that were up. Only one district had a race. The other 2 districts had one person that was running, so they were going to win regardless. So there were 5 people in my one district for my one district seat. And, talking to them and getting information out about voting, my district, they do vote pretty, but again, we were at 20%, mm-hmm. We have people who do vote. Those people who consistently vote, who are locked in with it, are a lot of times part of what we are experiencing right now. Supporting, that type of approach to politics.
Blue, no matter who.
Red,
red. Yeah, no, I'm a Republican. I vote Republican
yes.
No matter what.
Yes.
My daddy voted Republican. My granddaddy voted Republican. This is how I'm going to vote. And I think as a registered independent now, who, I've chaired a third party. I've been registered as a Mountain Party member. I've never been a registered Republican because my values have never aligned with the party platforms. But I am now an independent because I really feel like that's the direction we have to go. That there is no solution in either one of these boxes necessarily. And I think what you just said about building community, if I recall when we talked early on about you making the choice to run and what office you'd run for, one that meant something to you and that one you could enjoy. That was kind of the other criteria that particularly West Virginia Can't Wait recommended. Find something that's makes you happy and something you enjoy that is meaningful to you. Don't pick an office that doesn't move you, and then that makes your campaign easier because you do care. Did you after talk to me a little bit about that?
I think we should probably, if people don't know, your career is basically in education.
Correct.
So I've spent at the early part of my campaign, I was like 16 plus years, and I was like, no, it's actually 17 plus. And then I actually worked in preschools even prior to that. So I just quit saying like how many years at that point, because I was like, people are gonna think I'm crazy. But I'd taken a break between, when I was working in preschool work, and then, I went through college, and then I've worked in and around higher education, public ed, private ed, K through 12, for nonprofits, regulating bodies. I have really worked in a lot of I've basically walked the perimeter of education in West Virginia. And in doing that, I've developed like passions like strategic planning in education or integrated planning, and then also policy, because what I have come to find is that a lot of times there are outside entities that create policy for boards of education or other type of government entities. And there is an assumption of people in the community that just because that policy is in place, that it's been vetted to make sure it's constitutional. And that's not true.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
When you say an outside entity has made a policy for the school board, what the fuck do you mean by that? Who?
That's a great
Who
question.
is this outside entity that's making a policy?
So
I'm
Board of Education representatives and other representatives in the community, your county commissions, things like that, they're responsible for creating policy within your area, right? But they're elected by the community. So
In theory,
though, the people who should be running should be qualified to do that job. It doesn't mean, and I might get some pushback on this, I don't believe that only teachers are qualified to be on the Board of Education, because teaching is one experience.
Absolutely.
In public education.
administration is a totally different one. And understanding,
but being a student in that environment, the representation should be how the public education system impacts the community, having representatives that are part of the community to then be in place to then be a voice for the community, and then also regulate the overall structure of the school system. They're not supposed to be getting involved in the day-to-day tasks or the
Right.
weeds.
If only teachers were on a school board, then you would only get policies that the teachers
Address
would only
specifically,
be
right.
addressing.
Right.
You're not looking into any other perspective of even somebody, any administration, maybe janitors,
but
cooks,
now we have
things like
these
that.
these entities that are literally national think tanks that generate examples of public policy.
Okay, so I feel
So then you'll get counties in our state that they adopt the same policy
They
as
just
some
pull
other
it off
county.
a website or look
Yeah.
at what they've done without tailoring it to necessarily to the needs of their
Correct.
particular
And then they
county.
just approve it, and then people in the community are like, she's done.
She's melting
People in
down.
the community are like, oh, well, that's the policy. And so during my campaign, we had these lovely magnets on people's cars,
which are great quality magnets, by the way. These are not
Man,
cheap.
I thought the magnets were a really good idea.
Oh,
That
yeah.
is a moving.
That's a mobile sign, right?
Dude.
Mobile yard sign.
Yeah.
So there is a policy that's in our county that discusses not having certain type of political advertisement on the property. And the way that people have been instructed to read it is that if your personal property then somehow stumbles upon the property of the county Board of Education, then you can't have a campaign sign. But what that literal language means is it's their physical property, right? So you can't put a sign up on their physical property is what that's supposed to mean. Now, you've got Tinker versus Des Moines. You have the town of Gilbert, Reed versus the town of Gilbert. You can't suppress only certain types of speech. And then you can have passive representation. Those are things that have been deemed constitutional, whatnot. I have experienced as a constituent in my county where policy like this gets wielded to push certain political narratives so that people don't speak out and stand up against things that aren't necessarily beneficial to the area.
And to explain how that could be used in that way, for example, if you had a candidate you didn't like, if you saw their signs, you could target enforcement in a way that was discriminatory.
But they start doing that. I mean, they had been putting their signs on the property
Across from the property, yes.
Before, but
Yes.
now a candidate that they don't like is doing it. Now it's a problem.
Correct. And that's because they...
That's what I'm
And if
saying about
that isn't the
discriminatory
case, I'm sorry, but that's the
application.
way it seems.
So the people who were already on the board put their signs up 2.5 months, way before anyone else did. And that's what they started doing, is putting it across. Or they'd have people with trucks and they'd put a giant sign in the back and then park it in the parking lot of the school. And that happened a couple of times. So then there was they get an email out to everybody that states that all that stuff's got to come down. But reference like car magnets, but they're not making people take their bumper stickers off. And then also, since when and at what point during any of this did anybody get instructed to take their, Trump 2020 sticker off their car, or their Trump 2024 or Biden or anything? They weren't. And so it was specific to this. Now, here's what they know. When they get these broad policies from these think tanks and then they implement them, they know that in the area, people are too poor to sue for their rights.
Because to prove that it's unconstitutional to restrict speech in that manner, right?
Because there's not... you don't get damages. You don't take something all the way to the Supreme Court and be like, give me money. It's your First Amendment right.
I believe it's not. It is the money, but also there is a piece where people don't even see it.
Correct.
Or recognize it.
Correct. I think there are actually people on this board who are that unaware. They believe that it's like their role is to be elected by the community and they just represent people, but... So I spent a lot of my campaign talking about what the Board of Education actually does. And in doing that, talking about what they do, they should not be involved in curriculum decisions, because they're technically not. They create policy, they create a budget, and then they manage those things. They are the representative at the system level for the county. They oversee the superintendent. They're very specific things. I think that's the other thing, the other component about people getting out to vote. They do not understand how these roles or these political positions impact them directly, because they've likely been so either negatively impacted, or these people or these roles are ineffective. And so trying to address that, but then you also get the perspective, and that's just something, working on my PhD and studying Appalachian culture and things like that, we've got to navigate people not wanting there to be certain types of open discourse. If there's somebody, for example, that is running for the board, I may perceive those people as to be not qualified. But if I openly address that to a certain extent, and they just happen to be a beloved individual just because,
then you're picking on somebody.
Then I'm picking on them. But at the same time, my thought is, it's like applying for a job that you are not qualified for. And if they had submitted a resume, they would have been thrown out before they even got as far as they did. And so, it's those types of things.
We're not practicing DEI here.
Oh, Lord.
I'm sorry.
And that's like the whole, that's the whole, like, you would hear, but there was a lot of conversation that I realized was very heavy on the party politics. I intentionally tried to get people, force them to get to know me. Why? Because then they would start to develop an understanding of how I would approach policy and how I would make decisions. And instead of relying on the party politics, because that's what people do, they're like, oh, well, they're a Republican, they're like safe or okay. No, because they make terrible policy, and a lot of people right now are being negatively impacted by that at the moment, which is why you see so many people that are not happy with,
Sure.
how things are going. The Democrats do the same thing. I'm not specifically talking about Republican. I'm talking about, this is how party politics, especially in Appalachia, are never going to hit it, because what party politics is doing is a very broad, direction that they're attempting to go in. It does not consider the individual needs of communities. It does not consider the past. It doesn't consider the harm or anything like that. And so as an independent, it's an uphill battle, because you've got so many people that are just going to rely on what letters beside the name, and they're not going to look into that person, because they have been conditioned. We have been conditioned as a group of people to, if we align ourselves with a party, then we can just pick somebody there, and then our selection is safe. But then you've got a whole group of people who don't vote at all, because they have been so disenfranchised, and they are literally just struggling to get by. They're just trying to make sure that, they got food on the table. And I hear a lot of criticism about, people not voting. I am not as critical in regards to that, because when you put so many things in place to make it difficult for people to vote, you move a polling location to a place that's difficult for people to get to intentionally, especially in a rural area where there isn't any public transportation, or that public transportation would plop them there hours and not, they wouldn't be able to get anywhere. And then I know there's, all this conversation about voter IDs and things like that, but my issue with things of this nature that we don't consider people's struggles is that if you're somebody who's recently gotten out of addiction, and you've been in like recovery, and you are trying to then rejoin society in a way that is, how you're just trying to show up, but how you want to find
You don't have a utility bill.
Utility
You
bill
don't
to
have
prove who you are.
Car registration or insurance.
How are you going to get an ID?
Absolutely.
And then these are the things that people don't consider because that's not a position they've ever been in. If that's the case, if you can't conceptualize a struggle that is beyond your own, you don't need to be running for office.
That's a really important point that you...
How can you make policy for people that you don't understand them?
Unless you're trying to craft policy to create a scenario, which is a different approach and a different narrative, right? What support did you receive that surprised you the most? Like, who stood up for your campaign that really kind of caught you off guard as like an unlikely partner or an unlikely supporter?
60 to 70-year-old conservative women in my area.
Outstanding.
And
because they're sick of this shit.
Yeah. And it wasn't, and it's not that, because people would ask me, are you conservative or liberal? And I'm like, no, I'm an Appalachian liberationist, because if you only approach policy conservatively, you're going to hurt people. If you only approach policy liberally, you're going to hurt people. But if you are approaching it with the betterment of the community in mind, that mitigates that suffering. Mm-hmm. When I would go to these candidate forums, a lot of them were at senior centers.
Interesting.
And so the support that I had that I was very taken aback by were people who were, like I said, 60, 70, 80 years old. Why did that, I love their support. It's not that. And I, try to, I volunteered for that age, with that age group, like in various capacities in my community for years. What shocked me about it was that what I look like, my appearance,
sure.
right? So then if they've only been, around me for a short period of time, that means that what I've said to them communicated in such a way that they were willing to look past something that their generation has, struggled to process.
The way you talk, it harkens back to a time when we were much more moderate. The way you present information, and I think that when you say that age group, you're like the punk from the 80s, right? That everybody was like, oh my gosh, she has pierced ears in her mohawk.
Everything that I wanted to be, but I couldn't break out of the patriarchal
But they recognize too, right, exactly, that the narrative, though, is not one of extremes.
Right.
And they've lived enough life to know that center place is where we need to return to. And I think that you very much, your narrative and your conversations, exactly what you just said, it's not about an ideology. It's about the betterment of the community. And I think that people, once you live enough life, you understand what's important. And so I'm glad to hear that those folks showed up for you in that way.
I'm not going to dehumanize people, and I'm not going to be bullied into it either. And I think party politics dehumanizes people. And so when I would show up, and my husband kind of joked with me as this stuff was starting to take off, and he said, I think people are going to be really shocked about how conservative you really are, is what he would say. And I would kind of chuckle, because to him, he also knows it's the outside package, which is, it's intentional though. I will say this. I did not start getting tattoos until I was 33 years old. It wasn't like a whim of, being some young kid, just whatever. Same thing with the nose ring. And I didn't cut my hair into a mohawk until 2021. My hair was long and down my back.
You showed me a picture of you in 2020, and I was like, that's not you.
Oh yeah, it is.
That's not you.
It was 3 me's ago. I've been 12 me's. That's the Appalachian
Here's
way.
to new me's, baby, right?
I can't make this work now, so we're just going to reinvent ourselves.
Evolution
and
of self, and acknowledging that is representative of our community.
Yes.
I mean, we're in a position where our communities we need to evolve, or we're going to die.
Yes.
It's just where we are as a culture, where we are as a community, where we are as a species. And so you're embodying that in a really authentic way. And I know there are people in that room with their tattoos covered up. And there are people in that room who wish they could get the tattoos, but have been restricted their whole life.
Wild
right?
story. I go to vote. First day of early voting. right? And I walk in, and I had actually had a candidate forum that morning, so I'm dressed to the nines. And when I say that, so that was the other thing I think that was like very much, I am, and this is not
you
not
present
today, but
so beautifully and so professionally when you did your forums and stuff. And I love that you kind of shopped outfits with us. I felt kind of like on the inside, I was like, oh no, that one's fabulous.
Which one?
Yeah.
Well, appearance and presentation translate a lot, whether people realize it or not. That's called attribution theory and communication. So it doesn't mean that those attributions that people give you or the attributes are correct.
Correct.
Okay, it doesn't mean that. But knowing what I know about my community and knowing what I know about what people expect, especially, and I'll be honest, when I would show up to candidate forums and things like that, like today we're just sitting in a backyard and I still have a dress on, like, okay, and then I have something that, like, you know, because to me, growing up, you know, struggling, and if you grow up like poor or poor adjacent, I was one of those people that I dressed for the job I wanted, not the job I had. As a little kid, I would always want to wear my Sunday's best to school because it made me feel better, right? It just was, it showed that I cared. Well, what people don't realize, I showed up to the Democratic Women's group in my community invited me to lunch and to speak about my platform and things. And I walk in, and one of the women went, man, you were just a fashionista. And I was like, thank you. Everything was thrifted.
Right.
Man, I will
Yes.
rock a Goodwill. I've got shoes on right now that came from
you
one
got
last night.
an amazing thrift shop near you, though.
Yeah,
Like,
I got all kinds, right? And so so what people don't know is that, you know, they're seeing this and they're just like, you know, she just went out and paid money for these suits, but I will reuse every single one of those things.
But it takes more intention and thoughtfulness, I think, to piece together a wardrobe from thrift stores, right? Like, it takes a hell of a lot more time. Things aren't on display. It takes creativity. You don't know what you're going to find. And so there's a character trait that goes into building a wardrobe around really great pieces that represent, your pieces are not only beautiful, though they're powerful. Like, that's what I love about your wardrobe and what you put together is you're not just, oh, look, I've got a fabulous figure and I'm in a great dress. It's the entire presentation from top to bottom shows competence, confidence, an appreciation for your audience. And I mean, that's just stuff you don't see. I mean, if you look at our slate of candidates, and I'm not going to go into specifics, but there were some real gems on our candidate slate this primary season. And again, I'll let you all make your own assumptions about who I'm talking about. But understanding your audience is a big part of that. And when you go into forums and you go in a certain way and what you present, putting thought into that shows respect for that audience. You don't want to be distracting necessarily. You want to focus on the point. You know, there's a place to push the envelope, and then there's a place to kind of dial it back and understand that's going to distract from what I'm doing.
And my existence in this pushes the envelope by itself.
Right.
Because I'm showing up,
Being
first
alive,
of all,
right.
as an independent in politics in West Virginia, we just don't roll, right? Like, we don't, we've not really had any type of, you know, progress in regards to having an independent representation.
Even though it's one of the largest voting groups by registration in the state,
Correct.
I'd like to point out.
Correct. But you don't have independent candidates to vote for. So I can't be upset, right? So to me, part of this was like pushing that to like create some avenue for more independents to show up, to be those people in their communities that are trusted. And that's the other part. In my community, I have done tons of community service and fundraisers, and I've, you know, taught fitness classes and cared about these people and cared about their families, and there are people right now in my community that they don't like me and I may not like them, and if they called me, I would show up. Why? Because it's the right thing to do. And when we talk about progress and we talk about evolving, but at the heart of this, and I kept talking about this over and over again, foundationally, I grew up fundamental Baptist. I am now what I consider somewhere between a Lutheran and an Episcopalian, because I bounce back and forth between going to those churches. And the difference in the approach to theology is orthodoxy is what I was raised in. Orthopraxy is where I reside now. Because to me, it's not so much important about, you can have an internal belief and that just stays with you. Although I would say that it's a lot of times those beliefs come out in your actions, right?
Sure.
But to me, orthopraxy is the most important, because it's not only just the internal belief, but the outward execution of that belief to make sure that you are doing what is best for those around you. And that's really what governs me. community is important. Taking care of other people are important. I believed what Jesus said in those words where he said we need to be taking care of the widows and we need to be taking care of the children. That was the entire intent. But I know when people like clock me from 20 paces and they don't necessarily in their mind see that representation, which is still intentional. People don't understand that I view the outside appearance of someone not from the perspective of how appealing are you to me, because I think that is a very selfish way to evaluate another person. I look at them to figure out who they are.
What are you presenting? What are you putting forth?
Right. And how you put yourself together, to me, can be communication.
Absolutely.
And that's why I take so much time to consider that. And it's not because of what I look like, because if you're in my space in any capacity and you talk to me for any length of time and you try to make reference to what I look like, it's not going to go very far, because you can put lipstick on a pig. Okay. I did pageants. Like so what is that? That doesn't mean anything. That physical people being attracted or it being that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean someone's intelligent. It doesn't make them qualified. It doesn't make them a good person. I know that. So then I don't like utilizing that avenue. So what I generally do is I would show up to not just candidate forums. I do this at work. I do this in my career. I do this in everyday life. Do I have a cultivated look? Yes. But it's in a way for people to get to know me. When I looked like someone who was Mrs. West Virginia, oftentimes it would stop people from being curious enough to go past whatever physicality they saw, because to them, they already had enough information. They clock me now, and then, some people be like, whoa, but I will tell you more times than not, it actually causes them to pause and they'll hear me first. And, I can't take these tattoos. I mean, you can get them lasered off. I ain't taking them back. I just talked to somebody about this the other day. We call them adult stickers, right? Like, I work real hard. I should get a sticker for this, right? And every tattoo I have has a meaning. It is a purpose. There's something that it has, a representation of. I went to go vote, and the woman who took me to my booth said, "Oh, your tattoos." I had a cape on. And my arm only came out to here, and I was like, "Oh, honey," This woman's probably I don't know. And if you see this, I'm sorry if I get your age wrong. She was older, so I would say anywhere from 58 to 70. She pulls up her sleeve, and there's a tattoo on her forearm. I think of a butterfly, and then a little dandelion wish. And she said they were, and she drew it herself. And so she was excited to show me that, because I think that what has happened to us in our society.
I love that.
I did too. I was so touched by it, because I think what's happened to us in our society is that we've been so conditioned to believe that this outside appearance and representation, again, safe. And we've tagged people with a different appearance as being bad or wrong, when really that conditions us to allow more people who are problematic into our lives, because if they know how to navigate the look, then they can be more predatory. I think that we are breaking down those stereotypes quite rapidly. And I know I'm a millennial, so I know my generation is heavily part of this, because we are heavily tattooed.
Right, and is only slightly older, Gen X. I just want to say that what I see you doing as both a candidate and in your daily life is creating a space where a woman feels confident and safe enough to show you her tattoo. And we've talked a little bit about this earlier today, about our generation is really the ones we have to push to create the space that others can step into. And we're doing this with politics, we're doing it with community, we're doing it with narratives across the state. The conversation is just under the surface, right? But the place to have it isn't necessarily there until you create it.
Correct.
And when you create and open up that space, all of a sudden it fills in with this lovely information of this beautiful, treasured piece of art that meant something deeply to this woman, that she shared it with you and you remember the detail of it. So tattoos are just one example of how we can learn to accept what we can't necessarily see or what we do see, and kind of in that new space of okay, here we are. What does this look like? We have to change so many things about this state, but for so long we've looked at the structures and the people and the places when it really is how we talk to each other. And what you just said about your faith perspective and your faith practice, of you're an amalgamation of some principles that fundamentally boil down to the betterment of your community. And I've had some experiences recently. None of us are flush with cash right now, I think is a fair way to put it. I won't speak into existence any kind of lack, because I feel very strongly that we're not doing that anymore. But I was put in a position to be able to help someone with a small loan, a micro loan, to help acquire an asset that would generate funds in a more sustainable way. Of course, it was posed as a loan and phrased as a loan, but I will probably never see that money again. And if that's the case, that's the case. It'll come to me some other way. But I explained to this person who felt that guilt. We've talked about that before, about that guilt of need, right? That's legitimate need. It's not, you've done something atrocious and you found yourself in this position. It's just like, no, this is just a function of where we are as we exist in today's society and economy. I said, it's as much my faith practice to perform these instances of mutual need, because if it pays off and it benefits you, then that benefits all of us, right? Like, that's the kind of practice you're talking about.
Yes.
That deeds, not words. We can talk about mutual aid, but are you willing to put up a couple $100s for somebody who needs it now?
Yeah.
Even though you don't have it, it's a little extra that you've got there, or whatever. Or when you do have it, right?
Are you sharing? Like I don't always have it, but when I do have it, I give it, and that's.
But reframing that idea around, I'm not giving because you need. I'm giving because it's a way I serve.
Correct.
It's a way I practice my.
I even said this to somebody
faith
the other day, because they were like, I can't remember what the situation was, but they were trying to. Oh yeah, I do now. So I work with someone, and they love Coach. And I went to a local place. Man, should I shout it out on here? That means, see, I'm going to have to share, because that means, like, I can't. Anyway, there's a place in Logan called the Magnolia Room. This is not a plug. I'm telling you about, like.
Plug it, baby.
I'm saying I don't have, like, any type of, like.
They don't make any decisions.
We're just saying your name because you're fabulous,
yes.
Right?
So, basically that place is like an upscale consignment, right? So first of all, a ton of my outfits for my campaign came from there. But prior to even being in the campaign, right, I had just bought things there. But I went there, and there was someone who had a collection of Coach bags that they then, consigned or whatnot. We're talking about little wallets, things like that. There was a bin there that had, like, some of them for, like, a couple bucks. And we're talking about some of them range between $5 and $18, because they're used, right? Knowing that this person liked this, I bought one for them. And then they were like, let me pay for it. And I was like, you're going to take my blessing. No. Because to me, it was cool to be able to know that someone liked something like that, and then be able to create an avenue to, like, surprise them with it, or then provide them with it. Now, if you turn that into, like, a politic thing, in the sense of you're a representative for your community, you know that they need
their community,
something, right?
Exactly.
You know they need something. You know your community. So I had to know that this person was into Coach, and couldn't just assume that, right? So then you have to know them. You have to be able to acquire the resource and then disseminate based on need, not necessarily just want, but need. And then in that, because this is foundational to my faith, the payback is the fact that you got to be able to do it.
That you connected a resource to a need.
And that you then you get to see the improvement of those in your community who have been struggling, and know that you had a part in that. That is the benefit. That's the gift back, right? Mm-hmm. We've got too many people in politics right now that the benefit is that the decisions they make benefit them first, and they do not honor their fiduciary responsibility. But in approaching this campaign, in my personal life, I try to approach almost everything with some type of fiduciary responsibility, that the other people out. Now, does this mean I don't take care of? No, I need to take care of myself. I can't take care of other people if I don't take care of myself. But that's why you put people around you who hold that type of honor code themselves, because then they will make sure you are taken care of.
Exactly.
And so that's really important. And I think that's where I probably translated a lot. And I singled out like women, in that age group of the people that I was surprised that supported me. It's not that I was surprised. What was surprising is how many of them went out of their way to tell me that. How many of these women went out of their way to come up to me to tell me how proud they were of me?
I think that's beautiful.
Oh, it is.
I love it.
But if you don't experience that on a regular, I'm not saying that, those women
I think when a woman gets to be that age, because as I'm 45, and I see younger women and they're doing something, and they're doing something that they want, that they're good at, and they're saying, hey, I don't care what you say, I'm gonna be like, hell yeah, girl,
yeah, because
do it.
This is the generations behind me. In my mind, I'm kicking. Missy Elliott says this: I kick down doors for others to walk through.
Yes.
And that song from The Entertainer, I think,
Yes.
or the what is that movie? Whatever.
I don't know, just the fact
It's not
that
Entertainer. I don't know what that. Anyway, I love Missy Elliott.
Anyway, yeah.
So, yeah, kick down doors for others to walk through.
Yes.
And I might stand guard at that door and make sure that door stays open, because there's
right.
too many people that will kick that door open and then they will bolt it back from the inside.
Yep.
Because to them scaling that meant something to them. But if other people scale it, somehow they think it's like pie. They think it takes away from that.
Yeah.
In my mind, just because I had to suffer through something doesn't mean that I think that that's necessary for everybody behind me. Discomfort causes change. Suffering does not. And so even in approaching this campaign with these things, in consideration of this, I'm looking at, to me, all of this should be harm reduction. Mm-hmm. We should be trying to reduce harm in any capacity. And it's, if you don't have a lot of, it's not like I don't interact with people from all age groups, but to have a group of women seek me out to, like, I had one woman that came up to me. We were taking a fitness class, and I had never met her before. She comes up to me and she was like, "Are you Sarah Brown?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "I love your signs." And I was like, "Thank you." Because,
they look like chalkboards.
Yes,
Yeah.
but they're black. Like, it wasn't until later that I was like, oh, because mostly everybody's signs have a white backing. So then I was worried that when people saw it, they were going to think it was like, I was like, goth politics, And I was like, okay, I mean, I could see that, but that's not what that was intentionally. It was a chalkboard, and all I could get in my brain, because this was poor Tom and Lindsay, by the way, because like in my head, I had what was in my head. And then in trying to communicate that to them, and then them plop this out on, something, so it could be, this is rough, trying to communicate like, this is what I have in my brain. And we spent hours on the phone.
Though it
did
worked,
but it was something I had never
and that goes back
before.
to that genius of, like, it takes that whole alchemy of different ideas and different skills to come up with something great. And
Yes.
I love that you acknowledge that. Like, it wasn't easy. We worked really hard on it. We threw back and forth ideas, and
we had a green background
Code
for
on
once.
We did. We had a green background.
They look
because
more like
I was,
chalkboard,
I
yeah.
was worried about the, what black would look like outside, but apparently, and I had no idea.
it stands out way
Oh,
better.
they were like, everybody, the comments were like, it stands out. So this woman said early voting had already taken place at this point, and or it was still in progress. And she said to me, because she had never met me before that day, she said to me that her and her husband voted for me. And she said, I told my husband, anybody that was that creative to come up with a concept like that deserved to be on the Board of Education.
I kind of agree. When I saw it too and saw what the competitor signs like, I was like, that's really smart.
To me, here, I don't understand why somebody hasn't thought of that to begin with. It's a school.
Same.
I mean, come on. It's not,
because we were like going
this
back
ain't
and
rocket
forth,
science.
and I remember talking to her, and I'm like, I don't want a stereotypical sign. It needs to be something different.
Not to check the box.
And we were going back and forth. And I do want to say, the reason why road signs have a dark green background and white lettering is because you can see better when it's dark background and white lettering. And when you guys have your cheap ass political signs that have a white background and the the lettering is cursive and you can't hardly see it, it's a little pointless and a waste of money. And that's the only thing I'm going to say.
No, and that's true. And my other approach too with it was, so again, going back to the presentation of it, the presentation, sorry, that's in Megamind. I'm not a super villain.
Just a narrative version.
He wasn't a villain in the end either. He also had a black cape. Wow, this is fun. Anyway, the presentation of it, to some people, the presentation is just the presentation. For me, the presentation, it all goes together, right? So the cultivation of like what I would show up wearing, a lot of times was like very clean lines, very like one or two colors, but it was, to me, the approach of being someone who was qualified, competent, confident, but someone I needed them to know I definitely put time and consideration and care into showing up for them that day. Mm-hmm. For the signs, it had to do with acknowledging this is about school. This is about the Board of Education. It's not about
a popular
blue,
red. It's not about it because it's not about any of that.
Or purple.
It is about the school. And so we were Googling like other people across the United States running for, Board of Education, what it looked like. And then we stumbled upon a couple of things that were like advertisements. And then there was a chalkboard in the background. It wasn't part of the advertisement. And we were like, ooh, that one, because now we went back and forth. And then also when you order signs, anything over 2 colors, man, is like, so
and
like
that's a thing.
Yeah. So my buttons have a yellow border around them because the colors for my campaign were black, white, and then the yellow border, which yellow is supposed to be like the wood around the chalkboard, right? And so, but that's like how we try to approach it.
And school buses and how many other yellow things.
The number 2 pencils.
Yes, and that was the other part.
The colors I looked up was the number 2 pencil, the green chalkboard, the blackboard. Those were the colors.
Yes, it wasn't going to be anything that was related to political parties at all, because to me the race wasn't that.
Sure.
And so I getting a lot of feedback like that. So like out of 5 people, I was third. And then
let's talk about election night.
Oh,
I want to talk about election night.
The one thing I did want to say was that they made it very complicated with the school board vote. When you said that there were 3 people that were going to get their seat anyway, they should not have been on the ballot to begin with.
Well, I mean, that's
in my opinion.
It's part of the race, but I think the other part is we also had party politics interference. So there's a couple that the husband, he was a former county commissioner who had to resign because he used to be sheriff and got charged with a money
so now
situation.
He's on the school board?
No, he's not. But they are still involved heavily in politics.
Of course they are.
Locally. And so they made a post on their Facebook telling people, because you had 3 votes. Now, you could throw those 3 votes to any one of the districts you wanted. You didn't have to pick one person in each individual district. But they put out a post that made it sound like if you picked more than one person out of a district, that it was going to nullify your vote. So, like, they did everything they could in that way to try to negate people's options. I wanted 3 of us out of District 5 to run together, because if all of the people voting for us would have voted for the other 2 candidates with us, one of us would have gotten the seat. Mm-hmm. But instead, the approach was, kind of people only going after with them or
keep the good old boys in there.
But they didn't. Well, I don't think that was the intention. I think they thought if I have only people voting for me, then that will edge out. We wouldn't be splitting the votes. But my argument from the front was, if you only have them vote one person, they will be splitting the votes, because you're not using the other 2, or you aren't going at it from that type of approach. And so they complicated it even further, using party politics to confuse people. And I expected as much, but that's the other thing. So then, to me, to circumvent that, you educate the public and completely go around them. So, but election night.
Yeah.
I had COVID, so that was fun.
Oh, no.
I was working because I was a stringer. And if you don't know what a stringer is, they go to the courthouse of the county, and they get the numbers from the county clerk, and then we call them in to the media. So I worked for AP and for
Is it Metro News?
Metro News.
Yeah. In Wyoming County.
In Wyoming County. So I was doing that, and so I was trying to talk to you guys, and then when I started
And I
getting
was just
numbers, I'm
geeking
like,
out.
I can't.
And I was watching what was happening online and what was happening on the crawler on the TV, and they were completely opposite. Like, there were completely conflicting numbers from every source that was reporting numbers, which was really confusing.
And I think I can explain that a little bit.
Okay. Help.
The way everything is, it's digital. All of your votes, because they come in the big, they call them a trash can. It looks like a big old trash can. And when you put your vote, your paper in, it already counts all the votes. So when they come in, each precinct comes in, they upload it. It already uploads to the website. Those votes are already counted. Now the media is still doing it the old school way, in that they're waiting for us, the stringers, to get the votes from the people. And so I'm trying to, there's the school board was a big thing in our county.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the only race, and there were people at the courthouse just waiting for the school board, and so the county clerk had to like read it out loud because I don't know. So I was waiting for the piece of paper from the county clerk, then I had to go through, tally all of them, then call and give it to them, and then go through it twice because you got to make sure you got it right. And I had to do it with AP and with Metro News.
That does provide some insight. I'm going to take my sunglasses off because the sun's not quite as bright as it was. That helps me understand like why it seemed like such a disconnect, right? And then of course I'm on the phone live with you all, and it was just a very like surreal thing, to the point where at one point I was just like, I can't deal with this anymore. Like, I'll just look tomorrow, right? Were you anywhere with other people, or were you at home?
No, I was at home.
In your pajamas.
We were out by a fire pit, and I was just waiting for the numbers to come in. And I think that like buggy on it. Oh Lord. Oh, jumping buggy.
It's Appalachian
wild.
living.
Okay.
Right? So the numbers were coming in, and I want to be clear, like, it was heavily communicated to me, and I also believed this, that it was not going to be likely that I would win in my first race. And so I knew that. And when the numbers came in, I mean, there's disappointment in the sense that you worked so hard and you're hoping that you've communicated that enough. And I don't know what I had posted to give people the impression that I was like heinous in regards to the outcome, because I was like, this wasn't a shock. Like, are you guys all right? But I think what it was in that,
I think because you were finally like, okay, election's over. Here's the dirt that I
correct.
found.
But it's also one of those things where it's like, I knew at that point I had not reached enough of my community. So then it's like, there's more work to be done. So then I'm not saying it was a failure. It's just, it's like you realize that there's more work to be done than what could have been done in that time frame.
Well, I think the quick turnaround, like you were saying, just didn't give you enough time to get through the entire county.
Correct. I think the other part is that, truthfully, I should have, I didn't decide to run until like Thanksgiving, right? Mm-hmm. But I should have probably like locked and loaded at that point. But even then, it's still a learning
still a weird
experience.
process.
You don't want to burn yourself out as well,
and
because I have seen politicians start way too early, and then they just burn out before really things get started.
Yes, strategy has to be part of your campaign, or else you're going to make those mistakes.
Correct.
Absolutely. And I think pivoting back to the question where you got kind of surprising support, were there any places you thought you would receive more support that you felt kind of folks that didn't show up? And you don't have to go into detail,
or name names or throw anybody under the bus.
Well,
unless you want to.
So I think there were yes, actually. So my husband is a teacher in the county, and I had quite a bit of teacher support. But I had applied to the local teachers union, and they supported the people who were on the board instead of supporting a teacher who had been involved in the union for years and years, and other people who applied for the endorsement, and which I found to be interesting, considering certain people who are currently on the board's involvement back during the teacher strike, when there's a I believe like a lawsuit, court documents that are on, I believe it's Metro News, where our county decided to be the only county not to shut schools down, but that should have been decided during an open meeting and not over text message. And so there's text messages in there that show that there were certain people that were kind of, pushing for them not to support
not supportive
teachers.
of the unions, right?
And I was disheartened by that. But there are individuals who believe that if they support the powers that be, that they will get some type of proximal power from that. I should not have been shocked by that. And we will always struggle with individuals like that if we do not push back.
Yes.
And express how that is not beneficial to our community, but also if we don't express that we do not approve.
Yes.
And so that was another thing, social media wise, that I was very clear about and transparent, which I have found. That's the other thing too. There were other people that I in the community connected with this race who I thought would be more supportive, but then when I would acknowledge things, like I had some signs that got damaged. Not wind damage, not storm damage. I'm a researcher. I know how to verify or, go through the processes of like, is this what this is? And I was seeing something consistent happen. I've got, whatever. And I would actively hear people like, be like, well, that's, not what that is or whatnot. And I kind of started to become irritated at the concept or the idea that I was giving people consideration and understanding and giving them not just the benefit of the doubt, but I wasn't actively working to discredit anyone. And I think that was something that was really disheartening because as someone who is very transparent, I started to realize that for some people who don't want to hear it, they just want to tag that as complaining. Mm-hmm. And that's not how I was. It's interesting hearing what other people will perceive as your tone on social media. Mm-hmm. But I think that what people don't realize is that people filter tone through their own bias. And so when they get irritated or they snap off or they say things that you're just like, what? Where did that come from? Sometimes that's projection where they're technically talking to themselves if they were you, what they think they would do. So if they're looking at me and saying, well, if I were you and I openly talked about this, then this is what would happen. So then that's how they engage.
Or this is why I would put it out there, as I would want to make a point of it in this way or whatever.
Correct.
And I think it's really, I love that you're kind of unpacking that, because as we choose to run for office moving forward, one of the reasons I wanted you on this podcast to unpack your campaign is because you're kind of like our little science experiment, right? You're our poli-sci experiment.
But we
right?
love our little science experiment.
And you're such a qualified candidate. We're not throwing, support behind someone who is incapable or just out there to be flashy or whatever. It's someone who's really understands the issues with the systems and how, why isn't the best person qualified for the job the one who gets the job? Right, like this is a bigger issue than just who ran for school board.
Yes,
it's a popularity contest.
And how do we move away from that in a way that's not demeaning or somehow diminishing people who are involved in politics? Because you walk this line between like disengaging people by saying you're doing it wrong, which we're seeing in all of these movements across the state, right? It's like, if you're not doing it my way, it's not the right way. Mm-hmm. So you have to allow people to be part of it as they know how, but also keep it honest in the fact that like that's not just a hobby.
Well,
right?
You say like go about it in the way they know how, but if the impact that they have, regardless of their intent, is having that negative impact, I'm still going to call that out. You could have done this, like we've always done it this way. I don't care, because you always doing it this way is like left us here with the shambles of things. I think it's okay to criticize people when the impact of their decisions is negatively impactful. Now, if they're just approaching things in a different way just because that's how they roll, who cares about that, right? That's no big deal. But I think that what a lot of times people, if you don't fit in that box, then they start to get a little antsy because then it
challenges them in a different way.
It does.
But unions are, I've not been quiet about this. There's no question as to where I stand with unions. I'm pro-union across the board. It is the solution to many of our economic problems, quite frankly. But I'm really at odds with the unions in this state. and particularly the leadership of the unions who, as I put it, chase power.
Well, the leadership in the unions is intentional because post-Blair Mountain, you had to dismantle them, and that's exactly what's happened after the teacher strike. The people that are put in place for leadership are there to serve the powers that be and not the teachers, to then minimize the opportunity for teachers to go on strike again. It's not. I'm not anti-union.
Not at all.
I never have been.
But the unions are creating an environment where, and the other thing is, like with the UMWA, they engage their community to campaign for certain candidates in primaries, and then in the general election they flip and throw their support behind the opposite candidate, and it takes your entire community and throws them under the bus. The folks who are out there working for the pro-union candidate who we can all get behind. And so I have a lot of tension with unions in this state because I'm showing up for them and they're not showing up for me, and I feel that way with the school board election. Kind of epitomized that, right? Like, it's what is their process? And as pro-union as I am, like you, I'm not above critique of systems that are out of whack.
Anything worth having should stand up to scrutiny.
Absolutely. And if you are truly in the union for the right reasons, you understand that in your core, that a union is only as good as the accountability that keeps it together. And go watch Mate One. Like, educate yourselves about who we are and where we come from, because we have so much power, but we're letting our institutions and these, meaning the unions, meaning the structures that exist, manipulate that in a really unfair and unequitable way, quite frankly. So we talked about the fact we don't want to talk for 3 hours tonight, because we very well could, but I want...
And also, it's getting ready to rain here in a few minutes. I got a notification. I want to
know, will you run again, you think, down the line for something? Has it totally turned you off? Because I know some folks are like, yeah, screw that. I'm never doing that again. And other folks are like, okay, I see what I did. I see the strategy now. I see, like, the outreach. Like, I get it in a different perspective. Like, what are your thoughts?
So after the, post-election night, there were people that commented that, I hope you run again. And I was like, you guys...
Too soon.
Leave me alone.
It's too soon.
Well, it's also...
Please make sure you keep your magnets and stuff, they said.
Yeah. Y'all start getting your donations together now then. Okay.
The thing is that I appreciate those people and their support and their hope, because that was the whole point.
Yeah.
There is a... One of the, I think, ways to deactivate a lot of this stuff is like how people who don't win their campaign, but were the most. I still hold that I was the most qualified candidate, and I would go toe to toe to anybody who ran.
I would too.
Doesn't matter, because the county is struggling financially, and they are struggling in regards to what the superintendent had communicated had to be like school choice and the Hope Scholarship, which I could have a different take on that. For sure. But in 10 years, we've lost, I think it was like 16% of our student body population, or 10%, something like around that. So you're telling me in all that time, you didn't create any type of planning to address that? You didn't go talk to your community about why they were leaving? You didn't address the issues that were going on? So I was talking about those things. So as someone who is what I believed was the most qualified candidate, your popularity contest does not dictate or decide how I show up in my community and how I am still going to represent their best interest, because I have access to resources, or at least awareness of resources that they may not have. I have a knowledge of how to navigate policy. I have a knowledge of policy. I have strategic planning, impact in that way, right? And in knowing that, the best way to combat that is to still show up in my community.
Absolutely.
In that me not winning the race didn't change, right? It doesn't change who I am.
And in a way, you're freer in some respects to push the envelope and put those folks that wanted it so badly. Yeah. They were willing to confuse and cause confusion and delay and distraction.
But
make them work hard.
Those individuals seem to not be aware that sometimes when you put stuff in writing, or you say things, that can be on the internet forever. And there were things I brought up in the campaign forums where the superintendent had spoken to personnel and told them back in February that they would be laying off up to 120 employees. I went to a board meeting during the campaign, and it got brought up during that And you could tell that they were saying this like, oh, so it's not, so only 12 people currently need to be found positions, not like the 100 that's been reported. You reported it.
So what accountability?
The next day, what did I do? I marched my butt onto my campaign Facebook page and I went, bam, here it is. You said this. So you're not going to tell people, because that they are trying to twist that narrative of like, oh, she's out here lying and saying there was 100 and some layoffs. If you don't remember saying it, that's a problem. If you are trying to make it out that you didn't say it because that was a dumb thing to say during a campaign year, an election year, right? Rein in your superintendent then, if that's the case. Or how about what happened between 120 layoffs and 12? And why did you not communicate to your personnel in between then that it wasn't going to be that, so they didn't have to wake up every morning wondering if they were going to get their pink slip? Because I know you don't give a shit about those people, because if you had ever been in the position to have to lose your job, lose your livelihood, and we know you don't pay them enough anyway, which is why I don't believe in the indoctrinating, like teachers indoctrinating their students. You don't pay them enough for that. But you clearly don't know what it's like to be at risk of losing your job because somebody has been incompetent in how they want to disseminate those funds. Now, do I want to run for office again? Do I want to fix stuff by myself? Because what I would have done in that situation would be to put it all out there for the community to see, and then let them get mad about it, and then like let's push this energy to something that's going to get something done.
Where the ideas come from.
Yes, right. But and then use that, because these other community representatives are still representatives, and if they get that pushback, then it's going to cause them not to then want to push on certain narratives that are going to like be harmful, right? At the same time,
there's my basketball star.
I can't say what I need to say sometimes. And it's not because I wasn't being truthful. When you're in a position of running for office, I experienced this like the day after, when I'm explaining to people like perspective and then telling them about things that I know and whatnot. And then their response to me is, I'm being petty. So to me, that's just that's the same thing as shooting a messenger. I'm not being petty. You are telling me that I'm the problem because I'm acknowledging a problem out loud. Right. That's not me being the problem.
So what's next for you? What are you working on these days? You got your PhD, getting ready to wrap up?
I'm hoping to finish that by December. I've got my dissertation I'm like really hitting hard now. And then I politically speaking, if I were to run again, I think it would have to be for a different seat, a different position.
I think honestly, just like we were saying, I feel like you might be able to get more done outside of the political realm. Well, and I know Elise will disagree with me on that one.
I want to agree with you on that, because I think if the politicians in office are paying attention, you're somebody I want to talk to about education policy in my county.
Right.
Like, that's the other benefit, that a loss isn't necessarily a loss if all of a sudden your conversation is part of the conversation and folks know, well, remember that girl in Putnam County, because they always call you girl, remember that girl in Putnam County that was talking about this thing, right? I see the benefit in. And then what happens is those opportunities arise again, where the door opens and they say, actually, there's a county commission position that's open and we think you'd be really great for that. Have you considered running? And then...
That was actually my first choice when my seat wasn't up yet.
Right. So I'm just saying, like, I see the benefit both ways. Like, Lindsay's comment when you said... maybe this is where I belong, and I was like, yes, and she's like, no, we all just belong helping our communities. I'm like, she'll get over that. She's a little in her feelings right now about the primary election.
It's also one of those things too where
she'll be all right.
To be perfectly honest, I have also thought, there might be a regional position might be better suited, because when you asked me about who donated to my campaign, yes, there were people in my county who donated to my campaign. I got more donations outside of my district in this state than I got in my district, because
outstanding.
I know people across the state, and so I'm not saying it would be a state level position in that way, but I'm saying if it's a regional position where it's like a combination of counties where I've got a lot of
you got social capital and political capital, and
would that be a better approach? A better approach to win, maybe, but that doesn't necessarily mean a better approach to me, or does it do those community members service, right? I think I need to take time to like evaluate that, but I also want to attack the system and the structure of politics and running for office, because there are ways to navigate this that I think can be done in a much better way, to where we can get more grassroots people, jumping in. And here's the thing. It doesn't matter if I won the race or not. My community still sees me as someone who is a voice of authority, right? And so what they attempted to do during the course of my campaign, I say they, but it's like people who did not want me to win. They made an attempt to continuously discredit what I was saying, but they would get pushback at every go round, right? So whether people voted or not in that way, I can't say that, everybody that said they supported me voted, and I maybe all of them did, and it still wasn't enough. However, I'm a lot louder than all of these other people, and not just louder. I have actual tangible proof of ways that I've had an impact. If me saying something in a candidate forum ruffled you up enough to bring it up in a board meeting,
well done.
Who's the one that's really holding that power at that moment? What's true power is when you don't have to be in a paid position or an elected position to actually make change. Yes. And that's the role that I continuously strive to be in. So whether it ends up being a political position, maybe, but I think in politics, oftentimes it restricts people's ability to make impactful change, because instead of doing what they need to do, they do what they're told to do. And I will be the person who will continue to highlight that and put a spotlight on it, because that's what needs to happen. I'm not a journalist. I'm not someone from that capacity, but if I am someone who knows policy and I know the context of what's happening, what I also got continuously frustrated about, and this isn't to be super critical of other candidates that shall remain nameless, and I'm not talking about Board of Ed, I'm talking about all candidates that would show up to these forums. We had people who have been in like the Senate, and people who had been in the House, and people who'd been in some of these other positions for multiple terms, and could not throw sentences together to tell people why they should vote for them. And I understand people struggling with public speaking. That's why you work on things like that. But
No. You've been a politician for however long. You should know how to speak in public. And if you can't talk about the job that you're doing, everybody has a job. I bet you could tell me in 10 minutes just some things that you do with your job. What are you doing?
And again, the job is one that you've run for. You've actively tried to get it.
You say that you're the best to do, and then when you come up, you're like, oh, I don't know.
What that tells me is that don't know their community. They can't relate to their community, and
they're only there for a paycheck.
They are there for their own personal approach. Then they have to figure out, well, I got into this role to benefit me. Now, how do I sell this to everyone else to let them know that having me do things for me is still beneficial for them? Mm-hmm. Right. And so it is. It I think running for office to an extent did kind of ruin it for me, because I think it was easier to believe that there was a group of evil villains sitting around a table plotting for everyone's downfall, instead of a group of incompetent individuals who were apathetic, there for themselves, that were just making a bunch of weird decisions, trying to make it work and following party politics. It is literally like there's no direction whatsoever.
You just described politics at pretty much every level of our country right now.
You described corporate America. Trash. Everybody is not. Nobody's really doing anything.
But I want to point out that you're absolutely right. That sometimes you give up your power, your true power, by being elected. And I've talked about that. Like, if I'm out of office, I can say whatever the hell I want, however I want. And I'm accountable to the people I care about how they feel about me, which are half of them are at this table right now, quite frankly. So, like, I feel that your understanding of the strategy around that is another reason I wanted to unpack your campaign with you on this podcast, because I want other folks who are interested in running for office to listen and to see that it's not a perfect process. You are going to become disillusioned. You're not going to get support from the places you think you are. You're going to find support in places you didn't realize you had, which hearing about this demographic of these older folks, like those folks know how to pick up a phone and make calls. Yeah. So should somebody want to run for office, maybe that's a group you tap to do some outreach and some canvassing for you, right? Like, unpacking this and strategizing forward looking with you is something, that's my jam. I love it. I'm a geek when it comes to that kind of thing. But I would also work with you on creating narratives on how to help local candidates run, because I think also showing that the folks in those offices don't necessarily know what they're doing.
All you have to do is talk about how bad they've been at their jobs. I don't have to trash these people.
Right.
I can just talk about, well, this
Truth.
this is what this office did, right? And this is how it impacted you. And that's just the truth, right? You don't have to trash them personally or their character.
Because in the deeds of what's happening and the output of the policies is where you're finding that. I'm going to wrap us up here. And I want to say, are there any last thoughts you have about your experience and your campaign? And
I'm glad I did it. There was a lot of aspects of things that were exciting and fun, and I think that I just happened to be good at. If I were to run for office again, it would have to be with the community's general understanding that I am going to show up how I show up, which is I'm going to go hard for my community, but I don't think that it is effective for me to mitigate the truth in order to appease people's comfortability. And so if I were to run again, it would have to be with my community accepting that. And I also think that if people want to run, they need to do it. Mm-hmm. And I think that it will help you have a much better understanding of what is happening around you. It was totally worth paying $25 to live in their heads rent-free. Mm-hmm. And I will continue to do so because, not just because it's fun, but because that has to happen in order for them to understand that they can't do whatever they want to do anymore.
the discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
That's really, I hate to say it, folks, but that's where we're aiming these days, is for the discomfort, because things need to change.
My job is to make my politicians uncomfortable.
I think a lot of people need to be uncomfortable right now.
I mean,
politicians are one of them. Politicians is one group, but there's a lot of groups of people that really need to be uncomfortable and to realize some hard truths.
The complacency, or people who are, pushing these ideologies, but they're not actually doing anything to get out in their communities and help people. Those are the people that need to be uncomfortable. And to me, they need to be uncomfortable because they're doing far more damage and, pushing these rhetorics and ideologies just because they think that they are somehow self-righteous doesn't get anybody anywhere. And my thought is that they need to have a come to Jesus. And if I'm the person that's going to do it, then great. If it's not going to be me, I'm going to pray it's somebody else.
On that note, what say you, Lindsay Reiser?
Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming back, Sarah.
Our first returning guest.
It's been a while.
That's an honored position.
Well, we had Caitlin and Brad, and they were both on their
individual ones, but not
and
as
then
a
they
team,
come together.
Right? And they'll probably be one of our next follow-ups with their work and the water stuff. So check out Sarah Brown's TikToks and stuff, because I know the conversation is not over.
No, but I think Appalachian Oracle is where I'm at on TikTok. I did currently unpublish my campaign page because we're working on some stuff moving forward, and hopefully have that available to announce here soon.
Yep. So with the rain sending us out, y'all take care.
Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.
All right.